Okay, guys, you're welcome to our series that we'll be going through again on Cambridge IGCSE Geography Alternative to Coursework paper. So, for this first part, we'll be going to be looking at rivers measurement. And here, for this lesson, we are just going to cover how to measure the gradient of a river. How to measure the gradient of a river. Now, that's the topic we're looking at. How to measure the gradient of a riverbed. So now, without wasting so much time, I've seen lots of questions where they will ask you what are the things to consider when choosing a fieldwork site for river measurement. Now, most of the things you need to consider your safety first, and everything revolves around safety. Now, safety in the sense that you have to look at the strength of the current, that's the speed of flow, so that you'll not be carried away by the moving water. Now, you also need to take into consideration the depth, if there is sharp object, the width, the stability of the banks. So you'll not be taking your measurement and the banks of the river now collapse because it is unstable. And also some specified dangerous animals that are found within that particular environment. You need to study it before moving into such vicinity to carry out a field work. Now, your measurement should be away from human impact, where humans have a high amount of impact, so it will not affect your readings. And also high impact, such as areas with artificial levees and dams. Like, as you can see from this diagram, this is an artificial levees, which is just an artificial method to raise the bank of a river, which also help to reduce the process of erosion. And it should be away from rapids and waterfalls and cataracts. Areas like this are usually very, very unsafe for you to carry out a fieldwork activity. Now, accessibility is very important. It should be accessible by road. It should be accessible to the school. And so immediately after your data collection, it will be easy for you to transport yourself back to school and to analyze your data. Now, also river field trips or field work, the investigation should be done at equal distances within the upstream and downstream region. Now, a river usually starts from the source and end at the mouth. So what this means is the river is divided into sections: the upper course, the middle, and the lower course of a river. Now, while taking your reading, you should take into note where is the upper course and where is the middle course and where is the lower course. And when choosing sampling site, they should be at equal distances from each other. Next, these are some instruments used in river field work. So, some instruments used in river field work. Now, basically, I've seen IGCSE question where instruments will be given to you and you'll be asked to describe how you can use those set of instruments to carry out a particular measurement, or you can all the functions of those individual instruments. So here, let's start with the clinometer. So the clinometer is used to measure the angle, and usually is measured in degrees. You use to record angles, whichever one you can remember, we give you your mark. And the second point here is a ranging pole. So here we have two ranging poles, and the ranging poles is used to mark and also identify the end of the distance that you want to measure, or the break-off slope, usually on the end of a distance you want to measure. Then here is a string. A string helps to link the ranging poles together. It helps to link the ranging poles. So when you use your clinometer to measure an angle, you'll be able to measure from the two specific points on that ranging pole. Now, lastly, here we have a tape measure, and the tape measure is used to measure distance. That's just it. Then quickly, our main content for the day is how to measure the gradient of a river. So I've seen questions where they'll say, describe how you measure the gradient of a river. Now, this is a river from the source, as I've stated earlier, to the mouth. Now, how do you measure the gradient? How do you know that if it's on a steep slope or on a gentle slope? Now, the first thing you need to do, you get the instrument you need. You need to know them. The instrument you need your ranging pole. You need your clinometer, which you use to measure the angles. And you need your tape measure. So you'll be able to measure the distance from upstream to downstream. Now, this is the upstream, which is usually the source. And here we have our downstream. Now, when you want to measure this, it's simple. First, you measure 10-meter distance along the river. So if this is my point A and this is my point B, I'll have two ranging poles, so two survey poles at each point. This is 1, this is 2. So you put two survey poles in the riverbed. Now, and the poles should be standing what? Vertically, as you can see. Students, we hold the ranging pole. Students hold ranging poles at either end and measure the distance using what? A tape measure. You can now measure the distance, and it's advisable that the distance should be at least 10 meters apart. That is what the first point here means. In this case, we start from upstream, we are moving downstream. Now, our student hold ranging poles at either end and measure the distance. So an agreed height on the ranging pole. So we can have an agreed height, let's say here. And remember, we can now use a string to identify the two height so that they'll be equal. And then you now use a clinometer. So lines or strings used to identify position. You use your clinometer, in this case, to now measure the angle at this agreed height. Then you continue having, let's say this is point A, point B. You now measure another 10-meter distance. Point C, the distance here also should be 10 meters. You now have point transect D, another 10 meters. And transect D, another 10 meters. So you now measure the angles from this individual point. And so you'll be able to now draw a graph which will now give you a true picture of how the gradient of that particular river is. So you repeat several times and you calculate the average and you plot on the graph. Now, simply, this is how you measure the gradient of a river. So thank you. In our next video, we're going to be looking at how to measure the depth, the width, and the velocity of a river.